Meanwhile, by day's end, we may know the estimated cost of the GOP's Obamacare replacement plan, as well as how many people it will cover. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office is set to release its analysis of the bill today. It is expected to show that fewer Americans will have health insurance under the Republican proposal. Let's bring in CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris. He joins us from Washington. Steve, I know you are eagerly awaiting and anticipating the CBO's report on this health care bill. What are you going to be specifically looking for when the analysis is released?
Well, I can tell you what members of Congress will be looking for. Republicans specifically will be looking for how much this costs. So obviously there's some concern about the cost of this. But I think what everybody's going to be looking for is the number of people estimated to have coverage under this plan, whether it's lower, it's expected to be lower. But, you know, we've been trying to figure out what that number is. Paul Ryan was asked by John Dickerson this weekend, and Paul Ryan couldn't answer the question. You have HHS Secretary Tom Price out there saying that nobody will be worse off financially from this. So we'll get some of those answers. Again, these are estimates that are put out by the Congressional Budget Office, but at least it's going to guide how this debate is going to go moving forward. And I think politically the most important number is how many are affected by this repeal and replace plan.
Yeah, and this is really just phase one. I mean, there are two other phases of this that we really don't know how it's going to impact the legislation at all. But, you know, administration officials and other supporters have certainly been already criticizing the office's track record ahead of the announcement. What do you make of that strategy? Do you think they're a little concerned as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's the obvious strategy if you're concerned that these numbers aren't going to be favorable for your argument. But they're pointing to the CBO overestimating coverage numbers of Obamacare a few years ago and saying, look, these people aren't that accurate on it. But again, this is the CBO putting an estimate out. These aren't supposed to be exact numbers. And the estimate is supposed to help these members guide them as they figure out how they want to work this legislation through the system and get it passed. And so, again, it's not necessarily supposed to be totally accurate, just supposed to really give them a guide.
Steve, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas said fairly bluntly yesterday that if House Republicans vote for this bill, they are putting the House majority at risk next year. So let's talk about the specific concerns of someone like, for example, Senator Cotton.
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, it is a risky move to do this. You're taking away something that has been given to Americans in the form of health care. And, you know, if Americans don't like this solution, or if this whole thing blows up, then that could be a huge problem for Republicans having to answer for that in the next round of elections in the 2018 midterms. On top of that, you're putting Republicans, whether they're in Democratic areas or in battleground areas, who are running for election next year, in a tough situation, having to explain why they either support or didn't support this, and that's going to potentially affect them in a uncomfortable way in the elections next year too. So what Cotton's basically saying is, why are you, as he said, making Republicans walk the plank on this right now? We should rethink this. We should make sure we know exactly what we're doing before we put Republicans potentially at risk in the midterms next year.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about these wiretap allegations. It's been a while now, Steve. We still don't have any real evidence as to whether or not this happened. And the House Intelligence Committee wants the Justice Department to turn over any evidence related to the president's wiretapping allegations by the end of today. And when Kellyanne Conway was asked about that evidence in an interview last night, she sort of alluded to a wide range of surveillance techniques used by the government. Let's just listen to her comment and then her following clarification that she did this morning.
One of the things that seems to be dogging him, at least this past week, is the wiretaps. The allegation that Trump Tower was wiretapped. What can you say about that? Do you know whether Trump Tower was wiretapped?
What I can say is there are many ways to surveil each other now, unfortunately.
Do you believe
there was an article this week that talked about how you can surveil someone through their phones, through their certainly through their television sets, any number of different ways, and microwaves that turn into cameras, etc.
Specifically, do you know whether the Trump Tower was wiretapped? And you answered by citing this report about the CIA techniques revealed by WikiLeaks. Why would you make a suggestion like that without any evidence?
I wasn't making a suggestion about the Trump Tower. These are two separate things.
That's what you were asked about.
And I answered him about surveilling generally.
But you have no evidence that that kind of surveillance was used against Trump Tower.
I have no evidence, but that's why there's an investigation in Congress. That's particularly what investigations are for.
Okay, Steve. what do you make of Kellyanne Conway's comments and then her explanation as to why she brought up this WikiLeaks CIA documents leak?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you, I don't know what to make of it other than, she was asked a question. She answered in a way that, again, takes them completely off message. What we do know is that the Trump administration has been asked to turn over evidence of what Donald Trump has alleged, which is that the Trump Tower was wiretapped by Obama or the Obama administration. So we'll know soon enough whether there's actual evidence of that. And again, if there is evidence of that, it's not Kellyanne Conway that's going to turn it over, and she's not necessarily going to know what that evidence is. But Donald Trump could pick up the phone and get that evidence and turn it over to Congress. And so we will find out what the truth is here. And again, if he doesn't turn that over, there's not a huge amount of consequence either. I mean, it's a Republican-led intelligence committee, and there's not like there's any kind of punishment that they'll meet against Donald Trump if he doesn't turn this over. But we're all anxious to find out what he was really talking about in that series of tweets last weekend.
And Steve, when the FBI Director James Comey goes to Capitol Hill in the coming days, weeks ahead, if he, on the record, under questioning from lawmakers, says that there is no evidence of this, what kind of credibility will that leave the president with, both optically and politically speaking?
Well, that's up to people who are reading his tweets literally or reading them in a way that they're not reading them. They're not reading them literally. And so, for those of us who expect the president to be speaking literally, I think folks are going to say, what is he talking about? That he's accusing the Obama administration of spying on him? But again, as we've seen throughout the last couple of years with this president, he can say things, and his supporters don't necessarily take what he says literally. They sort of read into it what they want to read into it, and if the point he was trying to make was that the Obama administration and people who are still working in the government are trying to undermine him, then they'll read it that way. And they'll say, well, you know what, he's accurate to a point. So again, it's hard to say what voters and what Americans are going to think about this, but as we've seen in the past, there is a group of people who take what he says and believes it regardless of whether it's literally correct or just somewhat correct.
Yeah, certainly. And when Kellyanne Conway says, well, there's various different ways of surveilling someone, then it certainly muddies up the concept. It moves away from a wiretap to, well, we're having a broad conversation.
Although I'm not
stuff.
sure anybody's come up with the microwave camera situation yet.
I want to look into that.
Yeah, she must have been reading those WikiLeaks documents really closely. I don't think we came across that. Steve Chaggaris in Washington, we appreciate your time, Steve.
Thanks.